This segment is part 2 of the Hoovers versus the Neighborhood Crips. I broke down some of the gangs that are in the Neighborhood Crip card, and all the gangs are in the Hoovers. This time we are going to talk about some of the rappers on both sides and detail some of the run-ins these gangs had over the years after that. Now, this first case I'm going to get into is about two members of the Rolling 60 Neighborhood Crips, Marcus Megan and Tyrell Highshaw. On March 2nd, 2013, about 8:20 a.m., both Marcus and Terrell enter Hoover criminal territory, where they spotted Eric Richardson Sr. and his son Eric Jr. walking northbound on Figueroa Street. Terrell the driver and Marcus the passenger. Marcus said "What's up, Groove" to Eric Sr. and Eric Jr. Eric Sr. recognized the word with the Hoover criminals. Marcus then reached out and fired 3 shots, hitting Richardson Sr. in the leg. Terrell proceeded to drive away northbound. Eric Jr. called 911. They arrived within minutes of the scene. A nearby motorcycle cop spotted Terrell and Marcus going 70 in a 35 zone and attempted to make a traffic stop, but was took on a chase by the pair. After a series of turns, Terrell slowed down to allow Marcus to get out and run. Terrell proceeded to drive until he crashed into a fence. He tried to run but didn't get far and was later taken into custody. Marcus later being found in a nearby garage. Marcus Megan would be charged with the attempted murder of Eric Sr. and Eric Jr., discharging a firearm and firearm enhancement. He was sentenced to life in prison with a 15-year minimum parole eligibility. Terrell Highshaw will be sentenced to a total of 8 years plus 4 years gang enhancement. In August 2015, Devon Love drove Antoine Vaughn to Hoover Criminals turf for retaliation of a fellow Rolling 100 member who recently just lost his life. They had Rolling 30 member Timothy Boykins follow them in a separate car and record them. Boykins believed they would be going to Hoover's turf to fight them. Once they arrived, Love stopped the car and Vaughn approached a man that was sitting on the sidewalk with a woman and 2 kids. After altercation, Vaughn pulled out a weapon and opened fire, shooting the man in his back as the man tried to flee. Vaughn continued firing wildly, hitting him in his head, chest, back, leg, and hand. Vaughn got back in the car and Love drove off. Boykins followed. Video cameras from an intersection captured the shooting, and the shooting victim was able to pick Vaughn out of a lineup. Cell phone records put them in the place of the crime. Vaughn will be charged with premeditated murder, a felon in the possession of a firearm, and gang enhancement. He was sentenced to 55 years to life. Devon Love, already a 2 striker, facing his third, received 47 years to life. This case will be the last one I will focus on the Neighborhood Crips. This case is about Rolling 40 member Carlton Henderson. June 28, 2014, Marlisha Carter and her boyfriend A-Tray Hoover member Michael Harrison were driving to drop Marlisha's mother off, Annie Yates, who would be the passenger in the car. Michael the driver and Marlisha in the back seat. Michael pulled into a liquor store parking lot and Marlisha went in to make a purchase. As she returned, she seen a red Tahoe truck which she recognized as being a Rolling 40 member's car. As Michael drove out of the parking lot and stopped at a red light, Carter saw the red Tahoe pull up beside them. The 40 member asked Michael where was he from. He responded, Hoover. The 40 member, one bullet struck Annie in the hip and the other bullet hit Marlisha in the thigh. Shooting left 8 bullet holes in the car, 5 in the driver door and 3 in the back seat. June 29th, the next day, Carlton Henderson would be stopped and arrested driving his red Tahoe on 46 in Vermont, Rolling 40 turf. Officers found 40 bullet casings in his car and soon the weapon in the glove box. The gun will be tested and his fingerprints on the gun will match those on the bullets found on the scene. Carlton Henderson would be charged with 3 counts of attempted murder and premeditated murder, possession of a firearm by a felon, and shooting at an occupied vehicle. He was sentenced to 180 years to life. Now the last 2 cases will be about Hoover members. First will be Deshawn Atkins, a member of the 107 Hoovers. April 2nd, 2012, a member of the 107 Hoovers was murdered, believed to be by a member of the Rolling Hundreds. Mark Beasley and Deshawn Wright, 2 members of the 10 Deuce Bowlon set of the Hundreds, stood outside of 102nd Street near Normandy when a silver sedan pulled up and blocked the driveway. An eyewitness from across the street heard someone yell, Hoover, and shooting afterwards. Wright was shot in his left leg, ankle, right thigh, left wrist, and back. Beasley was shot in his right middle finger. After a few hours later, the police spotted a silver sedan traveling at a high speed. They attempted to pull it over, but it did not stop. During the pursuit, 2 guns were tossed off the car. Eventually, the car crashed. Deshawn Atkins and another Hoover member got out the car and ran. The other Hoover member will also toss a gun. The 2 guns were thrown from the car would match those being fired on 102nd in Normandy, but the guns had no fingerprints on them. The 3rd gun would never be found. Deshawn Atkins will be acquitted of all charges. With the lack of evidence, lack of witnesses, officers retracting their statements, and a refusal to make a statement by Mark Beasley and Deshawn Wright, he beat the case and he walked free. Last case in this segment is about 5'9" Hoover member Raymond Russell, aka Tiny Hmac. About 1:15 a.m. on October 16, 2011, Kevin Perry, Jonathan Rambo, and Keyshawn Corbin were standing outside an apartment building in Rolling 60s turf. A vehicle stopped in the middle of the street in front of the building and three men got out of the car. One of the men said, "Where y'all from?" The Crips. Keyshawn Corbin happened to be a member of the gang. Corbin would die from multiple gunshots, Jonathan Rambo was shot twice in the leg, and Kevin Perry was not hit. The three men got in the car and drove away. Tiny Hmac would drop his phone in the street, placing him to the crime. Kevin Perry was able to identify the car Tiny Hmac was in. It was a dark green Tahoe registered in his mom's name. Before pulling up the 60s turf, Tiny Hmac received a traffic citation, so the time frame placed him to the crime. After being arrested, police placed Tiny Hmac in a cell with an informant to get more information on the crime. The informant was a former Rolling 60 member who posed as a Hoover to get Tiny Hmac to confess. That's exactly what he did. Tiny Hmac would tell the informant police were investigating him for a murder and that him and fellow Hoover members put in some work. He even told him that he dismantled a firearm and that the police would never find it. The police would use this recording in his case, and Tiny Hmac will be sentenced to 105 years to life. That concludes part 2 of Hoover versus Neighborhood Crips. I'm going to try to drop a video every week or every 2 weeks, so drop comments of what cities and hoods you would like to see. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks for the support.